Good morning. This is Tracy, Hails Fast, right on Four Corners. Today I'm talking to Steve Brewer, also writing as Max Austin, about his latest book, Cold Cuts. Good morning, Steve.
Good morning.
I'd have to tell you, I finished Cold Cuts, the bologna caper, and I laughed all the way through it. Though I still had a lot of sympathy for your unlikely protagonist. Very good.
Lucky Flanagan.
Lucky.
He is such a loser, isn't he?
He really is. But he
a lot of
tries so
my,
hard.
Yes. A lot of my characters in my books are like that, where these sort of low-rent criminals who just aren't, they're not criminal masterminds.
Right.
And they're always playing the odds and working a scam, and they're fun characters to write.
I bet they are. Very fun to read also. You say that you write books about crooks.
Yes.
I like that. So, of your many other books, are they all in this genre?
Mostly, I've had a long career. I've been publishing for 30 years now, and nearly, and writing for 30 years for sure, writing fiction. And I've had 31 books. Cold Cuts is my 31st, and probably 27 of those are in the crime genre, either mysteries or there's a couple of that are more like thrillers, but a lot of them are like Cold Cuts. They're sort of comic crime, and that's kind of a narrow sliver of the market, but it's what I like to read and what I like to write. And then I've done a few humor books that are a separate thing, but I get my humor Jones out that way,
Well, what I was wondering while I was reading it is the writing of it. Is it hard to keep that balance from actually writing a good story with a good plot and sympathetic characters, but keep it the fun element there?
Yeah, that's always the trick with what I do, because you want a level of suspense that that's the whole mystery thing, the whole thriller genre, is to keep people turning pages, but to make them laugh at the same time. It's like one thing wants to cancel out the other, so it's a tightrope walk, and it's fun for me. I like to imagine readers laughing on the other end of this transaction, and
right.
that brightening somebody's day that way. And also I think these sort of dumb criminals are funny.
Very funny.
I think there's a lot of fun to be had there.
Yes. Yeah, it's a great balance, and it's very readable.
Thank you. Thank you. There's not very many people who do it anymore. I tell people all my heroes are dead. These guys I used to emulate have moved on. I'm one of the few still writing comic crime, but it's fun for me.
Good. Well, it's fun to read also. And you also have, what have you written as Max Austin?
Oh, yeah, I wrote 3 books that were ebook originals for Random House 3 or 4 years ago under the pen name Max Austin. And they're all, the titles each begin with Duke City because they're set here in Albuquerque, and so it's Duke City Hit, Duke City Desperado, like that. And it was just a business thing, the reason that I used the pen name. But Max Austin comes from the names of my 2 sons. And the first name of one and the middle name of another. And so we had fun with that. And I like the books a lot. They were treated like a trilogy. They have nothing to do with each other except they're set here in Albuquerque. But that's publishing for you.
Right.
They're good books.
Cold Cuts is also primarily in Albuquerque.
Yeah. There's some stuff set in across the border and in El Paso, but mostly it's an Albuquerque story.
Right.
I spent a couple of years in El Paso years and years ago when I worked for the Associated Press, and so I knew that area a little bit going in. how the border works.
It seemed like you were very familiar with it in the writing.
Yeah,
Before we go
yeah.
any further, why don't you give our audience a little synopsis of Cold Cuts?
Oh, it's like so many of these crime stories. It just started with something I heard on the media, news media, about people who smuggle a particular kind of bologna across the Mexican border. They make this bologna in Mexico to different regulations, and it's spicier than our bologna, has more fat in it and stuff. Um, and people who love it really, really love it, and they'll pay premium prices to get it on this side of the border if someone will smuggle it across. And so that's how this story begins, is with our very unlucky protagonist, Lucky Flanagan, getting hired to be a bologna smuggler. And of course, things go terribly wrong because that's how things go in my stories.
Mm-hmm. Right.
That's where the comedy is, you know. But yeah, it's based on a real thing. There really is
That's
bologna smuggling.
crazy.
Yeah, I know. People will hide like 30 rolls of bologna in their car and try to drive across. And,
Oh my gosh.
bologna's fairly aromatic. You would think they could just smell it, but I don't know.
No kidding.
Once about every few months there'll be a story in the media about somebody who's gotten busted smuggling bologna. So
Wow.
it's a real thing.
That's amazing.
and that kind of setup's all I need to go have some fun.
Yes.
I just take off from there.
Right. And good old Lucky and his misadventures.
Yes,
Well,
yeah,
why don't
lucky.
this would be a good time for you to read something from there for us?
Yeah, I've got this little place where we did picked out here where we talk about how Lucky got his nickname. I'll read that.
Okay.
Lucky was only 36 years old, but he had bursitis from a car wreck when he was in high school. No big deal at the time, a big purple bruise to show off to the girls. But the doctor had warned that the injury would bother him later, could result in bursitis and arthritis and other ailments that sounded like they only happened to old people. Now, whenever Lucky got a chill, his shoulder reminded him that time was passing. He had other aches and pains, too, from assorted adolescent injuries. He'd spent much of his teens in splints and plaster casts. His bones just couldn't hold up to his youthful exuberance. You don't get a nickname like Lucky without a lot of scars, the results of near misses and almost disasters in your life. If nothing ever happens to you, then you're stuck with your given name, even if it's something horrible like Edgar, which is what it said on Lucky's birth certificate. But if a lot of bad stuff happens, stuff that easily could have killed you, and you somehow survive, then people will say you must be lucky. The first person to call him Lucky was his grandfather, who was an eyewitness when lightning struck a cottonwood on the family farm near Bernalillo. Lucky was 5 years old, a city kid playing in the dirt at the foot of the tree. The lightning strike threw him up in the air and knocked him out cold. But he survived, coming to a few seconds later. No idea what had happened. "You're lucky to be alive, boy," Grandpa often told him. "You dodged the hand of God." Two more encounters with lightning when he was in high school made the nickname stick. Once, lightning hit a steel goalpost near him during football practice, stunning half the team. Another time, a thunderbolt struck the car Lucky was driving. Nobody was seriously hurt either time, but he noticed that people started keeping their distance whenever a storm approached. These days, he spent most of the summer thunderstorm season indoors. A man can't be too careful, especially in lightning-prone New Mexico. As Lucky grew older, the nickname became a burden. People said it with a smirk now that he had proven time and again to be unlucky. He got expelled from school. He got fired from a dozen different jobs. His parents threw him out of their home when he showed no inclination toward leaving on his own. Bad luck seemed to follow him wherever he went, mocking him.
That's great. Unlucky Lucky, yes. So is Lucky a protagonist in other of your stories?
No, this is a one-off. This story. I do a lot of those now. Mostly, I have done series in the past, including probably the best known one is another sort of loser character named Bubba Mabry, who has been in 9 stories that I've done, 7 novels and 2 novellas. And Bubba is a private investigator in Albuquerque, but he's just not very good at it, and so he gets into a lot of trouble. He's often like physically thrown out of places by larger men, and he gets arrested a lot. He's a lot of fun to write. I haven't written him lately, but every few years I'll write another episode, and the first one, which was my very first published book, was called Lonely Street. And in that one, Bubba's hired by what appears to be the living Elvis long after Elvis was dead. I mean, this came out almost 30 years ago now, so it was possible,
Right, right.
But yeah, and some people are still seeing Elvis at the Washateria, or pizza restaurants.
Right.
So Bubba's story fit right in there, and he lives on East Central in those old motels in Albuquerque on Route 66, and just a hard luck fella, and a lot of fun to write.
Yeah.
And Lonely Street, the first one, was made. I always have to mention this. Was made into a movie. That came out. It went to DVD essentially in 2009, and it was. We like to say the book is much better than the movie, but
of course.
But it was a very nice payday for me. So
that's great.
Thank you, Hollywood.
Yeah.
I've had other of these books have been optioned by Hollywood, but that's the only one that's actually been made into a movie.
So in the making of the movie, did you have a lot of input into that, or did you just kind of hand it over?
Mostly, I handed it over. It was I think it was Carl Hyacin that says when you put your baby up for adoption, you don't get to say how it's raised.
Right.
And so I took the money and ran. But I did get to visit the set for a couple of days, and that was a lot of fun.
Oh, it would
just
be.
hang out at a movie set while people were saying my words out loud, And,
yeah. Yeah.
And mostly I just hang around the craft truck all day eating.
Well, there you go.
But that was, and chatting with whoever came by, but it was a lot of fun. And
so were you happy with the outcome?
Oh, yes and no. I was happy to have a movie made, and I certainly was happy to get paid. But the movie itself ran into a lot of production problems, and had a lot of cooks stirring the stew before it was over. I think, and it shows, in the final product shows. There's some stuff in there that I would never ever write, but it's just that's the way it is.
Yeah,
that's the way Hollywood works. And if they want to, one of my books right now, Bank Job, is under option right now in Hollywood. And if they want to make a not very good movie of it, I'm okay with that.
It's okay. Yeah, I get that.
As long as they want to cut a check, we'll talk.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that sounds really fun. So, of all your books, which is your favorite?
Oh, that's so hard to answer.
I bet.
Bank Job, the one I just mentioned, certainly is one of my favorites. It's about these hoodlums on a crime spree that stop at a cabin out in the middle of nowhere and discover that the guy who lives there is a retired bank robber. Things go kind of wacky from there. He's a wonderful senior citizen sort of hero. You don't see many of those, so that's fun. And all of the Bubba. I mean, Bubba got me started. And so I have to always give a nod to Lonely Street. Lonely Street came out in '94, and I think it's still in print.
That's great.
It's still available all these years later. So I can't complain.
Right. Well, you have a whole city of characters then running around in your head, huh?
Yeah, a lot of the time. Kind of taking a break right now. I'm not writing a book at the moment, which I'm almost always writing a book. So it's been kind of nice to sort of take this off. I wrote a couple of short stories in the spring for anthologies that are coming up, and but I've been kind of taking a break, and my brain is quieted down. It's been sort of a nice rest. But yeah, a lot of the time we're in what my kids used to call bookland, where
Right.
you can talk to Dad, but he's really not hearing you right now.
He's in bookland. I like that.
Yeah, he's in bookland right now. He's with his imaginary friends,
Right.
so.
Yes, us writers can have imaginary friends, and it's okay.
Yeah, it's okay. Sometimes that's where the good stuff is,
You bet.
and you can usually tell if you're working on a short story or a novel. You can usually tell when you're ready to go, because the characters really do start sort of talking to you. I mean, not, or maybe not to you, but at least kind of talking out loud in your head, and
Yes.
you get a sense of the rhythm of their language and all of that. And then you're off and running. Most of my books, I always say my books are dialogue with occasional shooting. It's mostly dialogue.
It is.
If you do dialogue right, you can tell whole stories that way.
You can.
And so, yeah, and it boils the story down. My stories tend to be fairly short. I think Cold Cuts is like 218 pages,
Right.
something like that. But
with
I
the
pack a whole lot of stuff in.
It
Go ahead,
does.
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, with the dialogue, we get to know the characters really well, and it's never dull. It keeps
Yeah,
the pace is
right.
really quick.
Yeah, I like to think of it as being sort of like a play, with all
Yeah.
the dialogue and a movie playing out in our brain, sort of.
Right.
And so I try to keep the description and stuff to a minimum. The reader will fill that stuff in for you,
Yes.
if you give them the right details.
Right. Like saying Lucky is the whitest person in Albuquerque, right?
He's very white. He's a redhead, so he's super pale and has to stay out of the sun. And so they think he's the last person that would be suspected to smuggle Mexican bologna, because he's such a waxen sort of figure. And that's just part of the fun.
Absolutely.
He stands out. He really stands out in Juarez,
Yes. Oh, that's great. So tell us a little bit about your writing process.
Oh, okay. I'm what they I'm what they call a plotter, not a pantser. I don't fly by the seat of my pants. I do outlines, not the kind of Roman numeral outlines they teach you in school, but it's a chapter by chapter, sort of like a paragraph for each chapter. It just sort of outlines the plot. So I always know what comes next, and I always know sort of where I'm going to end up as I write. Everything else is a big surprise.
Well, that's okay.
But I do have a map to follow, sort of, And so I spend sometimes a month on that, just the outline, and it'll be maybe 20 pages by the time I'm done. But then I'm ready to go, and I try to write the first draft just as fast as I can, and I often do those in the summer when I'm not teaching or have other distractions, and so I'll write all the time, 40 or 50 hours a week for 6 weeks, say, and by the end of that I'll have a first draft, and then I'll take a break and act like a human for a little while. You wash my ears,
Right,
and
right.
And then launch into the rewrite process, which for me takes months. I spend months on the polishing and trying to remove every excess word. So the whole process for me takes probably 6 to 8 months to write an average size mystery novel.
Wow.
So not quite 2 a year. I can't. For a while I was doing 2 a year, and it was too much. I kind of burned my candle up, But
Yeah.
but I can easily do one a year, and without, and with keeping sort of a lifestyle going too.
Saying hello to
But,
kids once in a while. Yes.
Yeah, stuff like that. We're at that stage of our lives where all we do is go to funerals and weddings.
Right.
So all of our weekends are full.
I get that. So where do writing groups come in?
Well, I'm an active member. Well, usually I haven't been much in the last few months, but I'm usually an active member of the Southwest Writers here in Albuquerque. I've been on their board, and I do there's a little author group that I go to once a month for lunch. But I'm not a writers group kind of a guy too much. I have my own sort of beta readers and things like that, but so I don't have a critique group that I hang with.
Mm-hmm.
And my best friend, who unfortunately passed away 2 years ago, was my first reader. He was a wonderful editor and former journalist. We'd worked together in journalism, and so I'm working without that net these days. But my wife is an editor as well, and I have friends who read behind me like that, but not an organized sort of critique group. I'm more of a, I don't know, I do it all by myself kind of thing. I guess I could go into a room and come out with a book 8 months later, and nobody knows what I'm doing in the meantime. I don't talk about it. I find a lot of people, especially when they're starting out, they want to tell their story out loud.
Right.
And then they never have to actually write it.
Right.
And so I learned early, don't do that.
Right.
I just write, and when I'm done, then we share with the world, you know.
There's always the student that says, I have a great idea.
Oh, yeah. Ideas are easy. That's the easy part.
That's what I tell them. Go write it. Go write it.
It's the 300 pages, the blank pages. That's the hard part.
Right. Exactly. Well, who do you read?
Well, my favorite crime writers. I read a lot of crime. Naturally, try to keep up with in my field. You know.
Right.
And I'm friends with a lot of crime writers. People like Lee Child and Harlan Coben, big names like that. I'm a little name, but they're. I meet them. I see them at crime conferences that I go to, mystery conferences, and fan conferences, things like that. So there's a real community in the mystery world. We all kind of know each other, you know. But I love Elmore Leonard. He's my hero. And Donald Westlake, who also wrote as Richard Stark. And I like Stark and Westlake both the same. One side of him wrote funny mysteries like I do, and the other side wrote the best hard-boiled stories ever. And so I really admire that sort of versatility.
Right.
And with current writers, I really think Don Winslow is terrific. He writes about the Mexican border. He wrote Power of the Dog and the Cartel, and he's just terrific. There's a lot of good crime writing happening out there right now, and a lot of good sort of social commentary that happens in crime writing.
Yes.
It's a good way to get at social issues, and there's Laura Lippman and Megan Abbott are doing really interesting work these days. It's a bunch. There's good reading to be had out there for sure.
There is. I'm having a good time reading. So what's next? I know you're taking a break now, but you won't forever.
Yeah, well, I'm teaching 2 classes at UNM this semester, so I'm pretty busy with that.
Yeah.
I teach in the honors college there, and I teach a writing class that it's the 11th semester in a row. So I think we've found a demand.
You think?
for this particular class.
Yeah, it could be.
And so that's fun. And then I teach another class. They have different authors come in every week. And the students get to pick their brains. And so those are really fun and take up a lot of my fall.
Oh, yeah.
And as for which book is next, I don't know. I'm kind of bouncing around some ideas, trying to decide which thing I want to tackle next. But I'm not in a big hurry. Cold Cuts just came out the 1st of May, and so I still sort of have a new book out, you know. So,
right.
I'm resting on my laurels.
Good for you. It doesn't sound like you're resting at all with all your other activities. Reading papers is fun.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I actually use red ink, just like they tell you don't do that. You know, they say don't do it. It's too hard on the students, but I think that's the way I learned. I think they ought to have to suffer, too.
They need somebody to be hard on them sometimes. That's how they learn. Oh, you bet.
Especially when it comes to writing. You know?
Right.
It's too important to mess it up.
That's right. Very good. Well, I see that you have many quotes on your books from Joe Badal, who we did an interview with also.
Yeah, Joe's a longtime friend of mine. He's doing great guns with his thrillers, and we have blurbed each other over the past few years, as we tend to do in this business, you know.
Right.
But And Joe also is the brains behind the annual author fair that we're now having in Albuquerque.
Oh.
Every November, I think it's the first Saturday in November, at the Albuquerque Museum. And this thing it's going to be its third year, I guess, and it has boomed. There are going to be 50 authors there at this one that's coming up in November. So it's an all-day thing at the Albuquerque Museum, and it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of work for Joe. Some of us just show up and sell books, you know.
Right.
but Joe's doing the organizing.
Wow, I wasn't aware of that. I'll make sure I check that out further.
Yeah, you could. I don't know all the info. I don't have it at hand, but look up Google Albuquerque Museum. They have it all on their site.
Okay, sounds great. Sounds like an event.
Yeah, it's really grown. It's doubled in size this year from last year. So
good.
So yeah, we're looking forward to it.
Yeah, and I missed the Tony Hillerman conferences.
Yeah, those were fun. I did a couple of those, and of course I was great friends with Tony. I played in that poker game, his famous poker game, for years.
Oh.
And used to in fact drive him to the games. When it moved out to Corrales, the game was out in Corrales, still out in Corrales. I don't play anymore in the game, but it was he lived in the North Valley and couldn't really drive at night, so I was his chauffeur, and we had many great conversations driving through the dark, going back and forth to poker.
Oh,
as you
I
can
bet.
imagine. He was quite an inspiration and a big help to me early in my career. You know, he blurbed my books and all that stuff. You know, and just a great guy. And so I really cherish those memories. The time I got to spend with him.
Oh yeah. Miss him.
Yeah, we all do.
We need to tell our listeners where we can find you on the web.
Yeah, you know, my website, my basic website is stevebrewer.us.com. Steve Brewer, just like it sounds, like the Milwaukee Brewers.
Right.
And that takes you to my author page at Amazon, where you can see all of my books and all of my bio and all that stuff.
Great. And your many, many books.
My many books.
Great. Well, I've had a really good time talking to you. I loved the book. It was really well written and fun to read.
Thank you.
Yeah.
This has been fun. We'll do it again sometime.
Let's do.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Steve.
Thanks. Right. Bye-bye.
Bye. This is Tracy Hales Vass, right on Four Corners, on KSJE 90.9 FM in Farmington. You can contact me at righton@sanjuancollege.edu. Thanks for listening.